Chapter 2 of J.S. Bach by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Newman. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read for you by Chiquito Crasto. The origin of the texts of the chorales. It was a custom in the Catholic Church, in the earliest times, for the congregation to take a direct part in the singing during the service. To it belonged the doxologies, the amens, the kyries, and the hymns. At the end of the 6th century and the beginning of the 7th, however, this privilege of the faithful, which had been secured by Ambrose, was taken from them by the Gregorian reform, which substituted the singing of the priests for that of the congregation. In Germany, however, this reform was not adopted in its entirety. The people still preserved a few of their privileges, especially in the Easter service when they joined in the Kyrie and the Alleluia. The result was that it became the custom to insert German verses among the lines of the liturgy in these places. In this way the German sacred song gained admission into the religious service under cover of the Kyrie and the Alleluia. Throughout a long period of time these ejaculations formed the obbligato verse ending to every hymn sung in the church. Hence these songs were called Kirlesen, that is, Kyrie songs. The oldest Easter hymn dates back as far as the 12th century. It runs thus: Christ ist Christanden, von der Mater alle, der sollen wir alle vor sein, Christ soll unser Trost sein, Kyrieleis. Alleluia, 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 der sollen wir alle froh sein, Christ soll unser Trost sein, Kyrieleis. The mystery plays that had such a vogue in the 14th and 15th centuries also helped the German hymn to conquer the Church. The mixed Latin-German Christmas cradle songs have a quite uncommon charm. The poetry of them is of the most primitive kind imaginable. The words are put together less with regard to the sense than to the sound and the rocking rhythm, yet the bright Christmas enchantment that surrounds them affects us no less than it did the generations that have vanished. In Bach's organ chorales there are two of these old Christmas songs: In dulci jubilo, nun singet unseid frot, unsers Herzen Wonne liegt in praesepio und leuchtet als die Sonne, matris in gremio, Alpha et O, Alpha et O. Fuernatus in Bethlehem, ungekaudet Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Halle, Halle. Ein Kind geboren zu Bethlehem, des freut sich Jerusalem, Halle, Hallel. Cognovit bost et asinus, asinus, quod puer erat Dominus, Dominus, Halle, Hallel. Das Ochslein und das Eselein, Eselein, erkannten Gott der Herren sein, Halle, Hallel. In time, translated Latin hymns came to be admitted into German sacred poetry. The Credo, the Pater Noster, the Ten Commandments, the Seven Last Words, and various psalms in metrical paraphrases were also incorporated in it. When the Reformation of the 16th century threw the doors of the churches open to German poetry, it was under no necessity to set to work to compose appropriate hymns, but could choose what suited it from the treasures of the 14th and 15th centuries. Luther, with that wonderful artistic feeling for diction that even Nietzsche had to acknowledge in him, undertook to revise the old possessions for the new church, and to alter and improve them as might be required. At the same time he himself continued the work of the Middle Ages by refashioning Latin hymns, psalms, liturgical chants, and biblical fragments into hymns for the German service. The German Reformation had this advantage over the French, that it found a spiritual song already existing in the popular tongue, and therefore a ground upon which it could build. But its great good fortune was that it possessed in Luther a man who would not permit the old wood to be cut down, recognizing with sure prescience that the new song must grow up in the shade of the old. On the other hand, the sacred folk song withered away in the Romanesque countries, because it had no root in the Middle Ages, and had to exist as best it could upon the Psalter, as it does to the present day. At the first glance it may seem incomprehensible that Calvin, by making the Psalter the hymn book of the people, should from the very beginning condemn his church to infertility. He obeyed the instinct of the Romanesque spirit, and pronounced the judgment that was decreed on the French Reformation even before it came into being. Later on, German chorales and English hymns were borrowed to be added to the Psalter. The first German hymn book, the so-called Erfurt Enchiridion, appeared in 1524 and was probably compiled by Luther's friend Justus Jonas. It was issued simultaneously, curiously enough, by Trutterbulch at the Imprimery of the Dying Tub and in Mahler's Imprimery of the Black Horn. The sole surviving copy of the Mahler issue was destroyed by fire in 1870 at the bombardment of Strasbourg. Fortunately, it has been reproduced in facsimile in 1848. The Trutterbulch hymn book has been recently brought out in a new edition. In accordance with the practice of the time, this first hymn book was shamelessly pirated everywhere, among other places at Nuremberg, where the printer Hans Hergott so zealously pirated Luther's writings from the very beginning that Luther, on the 26th September 1525, had to petition the town council to forbid the Hergottlein to pirate. Among the 26 songs of the Erfurt Enchiridion are 8 German translations of psalms, including Aus tiefer Not schrei ich zu dir, a series of hymns done into German, the 2 medieval Easter hymns Christ lag in Todesbanden and Jesus Christ unser Heiland, der den Tod überwand. The old hymn upon the 10 Commandments, 3 hymns by Paul Speratus, including the well-known Es ist das Heil unkommen and some of Luther's hymns, including the New Lied von den Zween Mettereren Christi zu Brüssel. Ein feste Burg does not appear in this hymn book. Besides Luther and Paul Speratus, 1484 to 1551, there may also be mentioned as the earliest writers of sacred poems Nicolaus Decius, died in 1541, and Nicolaus Selnecker, 1530 to 1592. The last hymn book to appear in Luther's lifetime was published in 1545 in Leipzig by Valentin Babst. This, in its numerous reprints and pirated editions, remained the standard for all evangelical hymn books until the end of the 16th century. In Bach's organ chorales are found such of these oldest hymns as were also included in the later hymn books. A. Sacred Songs of the Middle Ages. 1. Easter Hymns. Christ ist erstanden. 5. Number 4. Christ lag in Todesbanden. 5. Number 5, 6, Numbers 15 and 16. Cantata number 4. Jesus Christus unser Heiland, der den Tod. 5. Number 32. 2. Christmas hymns. In dulci jubilo. 5. Number 35. Foernatus in Bethlehem. 5. Number 46. 3. Improvements of medieval song phrases. Da Jesus an dem Kreuze stund. The 7 last words. 5. Number 9. Dies sind die Heilgen 10 Kevot. 5. Number 12. 6. Numbers 19 and 20. Vater unser im Himmelreich. 5. Numbers 47 and 48. 7. Numbers 52 and 53. Wir glauben all an einen Gott. 7. Numbers 60, 61 and 62. 4. Hymns translated from the Latin. Der Tag, der ist so freundenreich. Dies est Laetitiae. 5. Number 11. Christum wir sollen loben schon. A solis ortus cardinae. 5. Number 6 and 7. Erstanden ist der Heilige Christ. Surrexit Christus hodie. 5. Number 14. Herrgott, dich loben wir. Te Deum laudamus. 6. Number 26. Komm Gott, Schöpfer, Heiliger Geist. Veni, Creator Spiritus. 7. Number 35. Komm, Heiliger Geist, Herr Gott. Veni, Sancta Spiritus. 7. Numbers 36 and 37. Nun komm der Heiden Heiland. Veni Redemptor Gentium. 5, numbers 42 and 43, 7, numbers 45, 46, and 47, cantatas numbers 61 and 62. B. Hymns by Luther. 1. Translations. Jesus Christus unser Heiland, der den Zorn Gottes. Jesus Christus nostra salus. Hymn of John Hus, Passion Hymn. 7. Numbers 30, 31, 32, and 33. Gelobet seist du Jesus Christ. Gratis nunc omnes redamus. Christmas Hymn. 5. Numbers 17 and 18. 2. Biblical paraphrases. Aus tiefer Not schrei ich zu dir. Psalm 130. De profundis. 7. Numbers 13 and 14. Cantata number 38. Ein fester Bürg. Psalm 46, 6, number 22. Cantata number 80. Mit Fried und Freud ich fahr dahin. The Song of Simeon. Luke 2, 5, number 41. 3. Original hymns. Christ unser zum Jordan kam. Baptismal hymn. 7, numbers 17 and 18. Cantata number 7. Vom Himmel hoch da komm ich her. 5, number 49, and pages 92 to 101. 7, numbers 54 and 55. Vom Himmel kam der Engelschar. 5, number 50. C. Translations and paraphrases from various authors. Allein Gott in der Ho sei Gloria in Excelsis by Nicolaus Decius, died 1541. 6, numbers 3 to 11. Christe du Lamm Gottes. The Agnus Dei in its simple form. 5, number 3. O Lamm Gottes unschuldig. The Agnus Dei expanded into 3 verses by Nicolaus Decius. 5, number 44. 7, number 48. An Wasserflüssen Babylon. Psalm 137. Superflumina by Wolfgang Dachstein. 7, numbers 12a and 12b. Christ der du bist der elle Tag. Christe qui lux est et dies. 5, pages 60. Partita. In dich hab ich gehoffet, Herr. Psalm 31. In te Domine speravi by Adam Reisner, died 1562. 6, number 34. Meine Seele ehrbet den Herrn. The Magnificat. 7, numbers 41 and 42. Cantata number 10. Kyrie. Gott Vater. Kyrie fons bonitatis. 7, numbers 39a and 40a. Christe aller Welt Trost. Christe unite Dei Patris. 7, numbers 39b and 40b. Kyrie. Gott Heiliger Geist. Kyrie ignis divine. 7, numbers 39c and 40c. The really creative period of the hymn begins at the end of the 16th century. The whole of German poetry is impelled upon the religious path. While France, under a monarchy conscious of its own goal, is developing into a strong national state, in which there springs up a brilliant literature fostered by an art-loving court, Germany is on the way to complete ruin. The nation as such disappears, and with it that national feeling without which no true literature is possible. When the country relapsed into barbarism during the 30 Years' War, the only thing of the soul that survived was religion. In its bosom poetry took refuge. Thus Germany, in its bitterest need, created a religious poetry to which nothing in the world can compare, and before which even the splendor of the Psalter pales. The hymns of that time are a mirror of contemporary events. When the plague ravages in 1613 the eastern parts of Germany, Valerius Herberger sings his joyous dirge, Wallet will ich dir geben, du arge falsche Welt. 7, numbers 50, 51. Martin Rinkart's 1586 to 1649, Nun danket alle Gott. 7, number 43, is composed while the bells are ringing out the conclusion of peace in 1648. These hymn writers are by no means talents of the first order. Nevertheless, the sincerity of devout feeling and the grave beauty of a diction formed by a constant reading of the Bible keep the average of the songs fairly high. Perhaps all these poets wrote too much. It happens, too, with the sacred poem as with the lyric. In one inspired song the poet become for the moment a genius, will express magically what in other songs he could only stammer out. And this one song will live. Johann Rist (1607 1667) composed 658 songs. Of these 5 or 6 survived in the hymn books. Among these hymn writers were 2 mystics, Philipp Nicolai (1556 1698) and Johann Franck (1618 1677). To these Bach felt himself particularly drawn, for they, like himself, were steeped in the atmosphere of the Song of Songs. He wrote a cantata on Nicolai's Weh schon leuchtet der Morgenstern, No. 1, and another on his Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme, No. 140. Also basing an organ chorale on the latter, 7, No. 57. He treated Franck's Jesu, mein Freude, in a motet and in 2 organ chorales, 5, No. 31 and 6, No. 29. The communion hymn of the same poet, Schmucke dich, o liebe Seele, inspired him to a cantata, No. 180, and to that splendid chorale Fantasia, 7, No. 49, that sent Schumann into ecstasy when he heard Mendelssohn play it on the organ. But even in that epoch there are premonitions of decline. Subjectivity of feeling and a didactic point of view invade religious poetry, and deprive it of that naive, simple objectivity that alone can create true congregational songs for the church service. At the commencement of the period of decay, when feeling and diction are already becoming super-subtilized, there appears on the scene, as if to check the decline, the king of hymn writers, Paul Gerhardt (1607 1676). His actions show that he was an adherent of the Lutheran scholastic that brought about the real Reformation with such startling rapidity. The reformed Electoral Prince Friedrich Wilhelm had required the Berlin preachers to sign a declaration by which they pledged themselves, for the sake of peace, to treat with moderation the doctrinal differences between the Reformed and the Lutheran churches. Paul Gerhardt, in spite of friendly advances from the prince, could not be induced either to sign the declaration or to make a verbal promise, and consequently had to relinquish his office. The gentle-hearted man, it is true, had never employed in the pulpit the violent kind of polemic to which the Electoral Prince wanted to put an end. He regarded, however, the promise that was demanded of him as a sort of treachery to the faith of his fathers. Of his 120 hymns, more than 20 have found a place in the hymn books. They breathe a vigorous, simple piety, and are expressed in a popular diction of excellent quality. Even in the lifetime of the poet some of them came into use in the church, while in Bach's time many had become public property. Bach was an admirer of Gerhardt, and repeatedly employed verses from his hymns in his cantatas. In the St. Matthew Passion he makes use of 5 verses from O Haupt voll Blut und Wunden, and one from Befehl du deine Wege. The really creative period of the church song, however, had come to an end by Bach's time. Pietism did indeed produce some spiritual poetry, but for Bach's work, so far as the chorale strophes are concerned, this is of little importance. He seized upon the copious treasures of the past that lay to his hand in the hymn books. The following figures will give an idea of the increase of the riches at his disposal. The little Erfurt hymn book of 1524 contained 26 songs, that of Babst in the first edition 101. Kruger's, that was in use in Berlin for almost a century, in its first edition 1640, 250, and in its fourth edition 1736, 1300. The Lüneburg 1686, 2000. The Leipzig 1697, over 5000. Who knows from the inventory that has been preserved that the 8 volumes of the Leipzig hymn book were in the possession of Bach? What became of the volumes, the leaves of which he must so often have turned over, is not known. It was unfortunate for Bach's work that the old chorale took so prominent a place in it. For this reason, it was included in the censure which rationalism, in the name of purified taste, pronounced upon the church hymn of the past. For the second half of the 18th century Bach's cantatas and passions did not exist. They had gone into exile with the old church hymn. Only after the reaction instituted by Ernest Moritz Arndt (1769 1860), Max von Schenkendorf (1783 1817), and Philipp Spitta (1801 1859), against the neglect of the hymn book, had once more brought the old poems into repute, were the conditions established under which a new epoch could again comprehend the old master and the piety that gave birth to his works. Thus it is no accident that it was the son of the poet of psalter and harp who made it his life task to reveal Bach to the world. End of chapter 2. Read for you by Chiquito Crasto, Birmingham, Alabama.